Okay. All right, so I did my research on, well, both of my studies were about undergraduate and college tuition and student debt, and their effects on the United States as a whole, and also on social justice in the United States. Now, I mean, we all know how I feel about certain things, and I feel like this is something that, regardless of where you stand politically, I feel like this is something that a lot of us can agree on, that we have now created a culture of student debt that is, in my own words, like we've seen. But I explored this through a whole bunch of different sources. My main source was through the College Board. They release a yearly journal called Trends in College Pricing. I also used data from the U.S. Department of Education. I used data from nonprofit organizations that advocate for education, such as the Luna Foundation. I also used, and Education Central. I also used several news sources as well. But what I found is that students and their parents, they've been really overwhelmed over the last few years regarding the rising college tuitions. There's a growing pressure to obtain a college degree, and many people take out loans at very high interest rates. And even though many colleges, they cut expenses, they've been cutting expenses over the last few years, the tuition has just been rising anyway. And amidst the economic turmoil of the 2008 recession, students increasingly find themselves unable to continue their educations, unable to obtain a degree, unable to find well-paying, meaningful jobs, and unable to pay off their loans. And then this high tuition, these large student debts, a lack of employment opportunities, and other factors such as class and race, they've been leading to a $1.2 trillion collective student debt in the United States. And this is unheard of, even like 20 years ago. So I looked at how colleges are priced for this year, for the 2015 to 2016 year, and I compared them to 2014, and a four-year in-state education cost $9,410 a year, and that's a 2.9% increase from last year. An out-of-state education costs $23,893, that's a 3.4% increase. And a private, nonprofit, four-year education on average costs $32,405, which is a 3.6% increase from last year. And none of that includes room and board, doesn't include transportation, clothing, medical care. It doesn't include any of that. When you look at just including room and board, four-year in-state, it's $19,548 a year. Out-of-state for public school is $34,031 a year, and for private nonprofit four-year education is $43,921. And again, that doesn't include things like books and supplies, transportation, and other expenses. It can go up to about, on average, that's not the maximum, but on average, for the highest, for private, non-profit four-year education, on average, it's $47,831. Now, CNBC, it published a report. It was a very comprehensive report, actually, and it compared these costs, and it used a timeline from January 1st, 1971 to January 1st, 2014. And found that public four-year tuition only increased by 265%, and private tuition increased by 191%. And other costs such as the living expenses, the food and beverages, medical care, these things also increased. And for example, medical care over that period increased 1,105%. So all these costs have been increasing over the last several decades, and yet it hasn't. It's been surpassing inflation. Tuition has been increasing about 6% faster per year than inflation, and wages have been stagnant ever since the 2008 financial crisis. To give you an example of the economic climate, in just the last 5 months of the Bush administration, we lost almost 3 million jobs. Wages have been getting lower, and in total, in about 2 years, we lost 8.7 million jobs. And it took 4 years for the United States to have any net gain of jobs since the recession began. But since then, there were 15 million new workers, most of which were college graduates in the system. So even if we have a net gain of jobs, there are still a lot more eligible workers who cannot find work. College graduates in 2012 who entered a job market, they found that there was a reduction of 10 to 15% of average wages, and this reduction would last for the next 10 years, so up until 2022. They would be getting paid 10 to 15% less than they would have been paid before the financial crisis. Now, and also the quality of jobs has worsened, and again, there's rising inflation. Now, a lot of these students, they find themselves taking loans, and the standard loan is 10 years to pay off your debt, but research shows otherwise. It shows that the average bachelor's degree holder takes 21 years to pay off his or her loans. And under income-based repayment options, the federal government will forgive your loans after 20 years. Now, this means that students have been taking much longer to pay off their loans. Which means that it becomes more difficult for graduates to take risks such as buying cars, buying homes, starting businesses. And this causes almost a necessity of government intervention. Now, in 2013 to 2014, there were 9 million students who participated in the Pell Grant program. This is financial aid that is provided by the federal government. And ever since the recession, every year there are more people on the Pell Grant program. But over the last 2 years, it's been getting budget cuts. So 33.7 billion were spent in 2013 to 2014, but it will be cut to it would have about 22.1 billion appropriated for it in 2016. And this was as a result of more than one budget that was passed in Congress. It was Senate Democrats in 2013 who cut the appropriation by about $370 million. And this was actually a surplus in the Pell Grant program. And what it's typically used for is it's saved for the next year. But they cut it and used it elsewhere. And this year, House Republicans are due to do the same thing. They're going to cut it a little bit more. Now, the people who need the Pell Grant programs are people who are lower on the socioeconomic ladder. A study found that by the Education Trust found that 51% of Pell Grant students graduate nationwide as compared to 65% of non-Pell students. And a correlation is that the Pell Grant students find themselves in underfunded and overcrowded colleges where they are less likely to develop fully or to graduate. And now, because of the growing income and wealth inequality over the last few years, there's also a racial disparity there because typically people who are black, people who are Latino, people who are minorities, they typically make less money than white people in this country. And again, they find themselves going to more overcrowded and underfunded colleges. About 30% of African American and Hispanic students who had an A average in high school wind up at community colleges. And that's after affirmative action, which is meant to provide equal access, but it's not truly effective. And typically, well, what this means is that college is becoming more expensive. It's becoming more expensive every single year. I know that since I've been here, Wagner College is already like $4,000 more expensive than when I started. It happens everywhere. And going into this site, I really just wanted to prove myself wrong. I really wanted to find something that said that it was getting better, but I find that it's again, college is becoming more expensive. It's becoming more difficult. The job market is worse off now than it was 10 years ago. Income and wealth inequality is worse now after the recession. There have been racial discrepancies at universities because there are less minorities at the top education institutions. And my conclusion is that, well, I found that in one of the studies, it said that we spend about $178 billion on loans and grants, but to make public four-year education free, it would cost an extra $40 billion. So, I mean, if you do the math, it's an extra $40 billion on top of $178 billion. It's not that much of an increase, but from my understanding is that it would definitely help people who are lower on the socioeconomic ladder, people who find themselves in underfunded colleges, people who find themselves unable to pay for college, who have enormous debt, who are paying very, very high interest rates. What I found is that if you do that, it would at least solve some very minor issues in our current system, which are there would be no more racial or economic disparities, at least at public universities, and student debt would definitely decrease.
Two quick questions. So you've really done here is write a policy paper, even though you provided a body of research. My question is, your central question, which I remember from when these questions were approved, could you just repeat for me the specific hypothesis that you were testing?
So, specific hypothesis was that, well, I raised the question of whether continuing this culture of debt, especially for people of lower socioeconomic status, is socially just. And what I found was that no, it is not, and we have to take steps to solve this. And from my understanding, the first step is to spend the extra $40 billion instead of cutting Pell Grants, which again, more people are going on every year, and every year Congress is cutting more and more. So instead of going that route of the budget cuts, if we would spend a little bit more, we would find that people would come out with less debt, they would be able to take the risks, they would be able to buy cars, buy homes, start businesses, and it would be overall better for these people, and it would be better for our economy in general.
Any questions from your colleagues?